with that, I'm going to bring in Troy Morris from Kall Morris Inc, KMI. Hey, Troy.
Hello there.
So do you want to go ahead and bring up your presentation?
Yes, I can.
All right, so I met Troy on what was it? It was a space hypersonic challenge or hyper something challenge.
Yeah, it would have been
Hyperspace
Hyperspace
challenge.
Challenge from New
Yeah,
Mexico.
right. Hyperspace challenge. And this was actually when I first retired from the federal government, after the federal version of this was shut down for being Navy centric, not Navy centric enough for the Navy. But anyway, we'll leave that at that. But I was doing some consulting while I was building up my plans and doing my vetting and due diligence for starting a commercial version of that platform, and that's how I met Troy and Kall Morris. The other thing is that I had mentioned earlier about what Troy does with with taking objects out of orbit, and Troy is going to introduce me to the people that repurpose things in orbit, and hopefully we can get that topic on, because I think that's a really good topic to discuss. So with
Yeah,
that, I will turn this over to Troy to introduce himself and talk about what it is that they do.
yeah, and happy to keep this conversation either at the YouTube friendly level or if there's more engaging pieces, let's have what we're able to right now. I definitely tried to keep the slides on that more public facing side, as I don't have the background for every of the lovely individuals on this call or controlling it in the future. But yeah, I'm Troy. I'm one
All
of
right,
the co-founders for Kall
Troy,
Morris Inc.
really quick, Troy, I would
Yeah,
prefer that we keep it on the YouTube level, just
understood.
because I want to, because one of the things I'm working on is setting up a forum just for the federal government and DoD, where we can have those discussions around IP, and we can, without those issues. But right now, I have no way of stopping commercial entities or your competitors from attending this or seeing this. So I would prefer that we avoid that altogether.
Understood. Just from hearing the end of Bill's wonderful presentation there. So yeah, I'll keep things then on the easier side of things. But I am a co-founder and I'm the CEO for KMI. So you may have seen or heard about us. I find way too many people know us from the tentacle monster I'll show in a minute, and not so much the wealth of opportunities that we're presenting, both for commercial and the warfighter. But really, as a summary, if you're not going to go with the KMI tagline of keeping space clear for all that was on the first slide, it's really what it says in the top right corner is space solutions. We happen to be focusing on orbital debris right now because that's the nearest hazard as we see it. So for those who aren't familiar, if they do come from their Navy or otherwise, and all respect to the Navy Research Lab, Bernie especially, and them over there. But for those not so familiar, why are we talking debris when there's so many other adversaries or issues? Is this is the one adversary you can't negotiate with. So between the quantity of objects launched, they don't behave rationally. There is no ambassador to talk about for physics and Newton and Hamiltonian physics. It's just the reality that exponential growth plus the anti-satellite tests that have already occurred is continuing to create an environment that the kinetic energy equation just is going to win. So for those who maybe aren't sharpest at their high energy physics, a 1 centimeter piece, the size of your pinky nail, is going to impact, like it shows on the right, like a hand grenade. And the pieces in space are far, far larger. An average satellite at about 136 kilograms, that's a 1-ton bunker buster. And one of our employees is from a 20-year experience in munitions. And so he gave me enough examples to terrify me, but that's not the point here. It's not to just induce fear. Space is overrun with debris, we all lose. If it's with collisions, we all lose. The question here is, how do we, both as humanity and the United States, continue to win? So our team comes from a wealth of experiences. There's my two co-founders, Adam and Austin, as well as some of the Space Rangers. We've actually had more people where I had to increase the number. I don't even have the headshots for everybody yet. But we come from over nearly 200 years of aerospace experience. We're bringing dozens of degrees all to the problem set here of how do we solve the unsolvable? How do we work on a problem that these things were launched without docking systems, without fiducials, without a transponder? How do you tow a truck that doesn't even tell you where it is? It's really what it boils down to, just at orbital speeds. So at KMI, we've been developing and under contract to develop a few solutions here. So on the public side, Those main pieces will be Laylaps, the actual spacecraft that is optimized for rendezvous and proximity operations in orbit. And then it will play host to a variety of different softwares and technologies below that, starting with Tumbleye for how do you actually rendezvous with an unprepared object, Reach, how do you affix and control onto an unprepared surface, and Asteria, which is the newest of the family, but that is if you wanted to intentionally leave something behind on an object, such as a transponder, a deorbit device, additional comms or propulsion that the craft is doing fine. We just, have invented a few better pieces of technology since it may have launched in 1990. This gives an option for hardware upgrade or more creative solutions as we've been approached by a few different end customers. So to understand a little bit more of how these kind of work, this slide helps show in motion the terrestrial testing off to the left of one set of those Reach arms. And then as you see off to the right, that's an in-orbit mock-up for how we'll be applying with the orthogonal technology, able to secure against a cube, a cylinder, orbs. I get the question a lot of how much can Reach in this whole system grab? Our testing has shown everything from the size of a basketball to about the diameter of the James Webb mirrors. So it's quite expansive because as you can see from those arms on the left, they don't have to wrap around the far corners to be able to have a securing hold on an unprepared object in orbit. So it really gives us a variety of options to service both, satellites in distress, assets that are under distress, things that have no control, like old rocket bodies, and a lot of other things around there. So to understand that, ConOps, if you're more of a fan of the big picture rather than the moving pictures, is that we move through the system with our partners. This is a satellite as a service type model. So it's something that we're able to really optimize and be near at call for a variety of just-in-time solutions. So being a spacecraft designed for dynamic space operations, we really can help a number of customers in multiple branches of the US, but also our main customer focus is the commercial side. It's great and we enjoy working with our warfighters and our civil space aspects, but it is something we also have a driving interest for the commercial world of keeping those ground imaging satellites where they want to be, protecting the future space stations that are going to be commercial, and really being a tow truck supporting this larger, ever-growing space ecosystem, as well as all those services they support on the ground. For those who may have heard that we have the ISS experiment, or if I failed to mention it here, we have an ISS experiment. So my team is working as we speak. They're passing through safety. They did fit and function to this last week. I know we've got NASA Ames coming out for a visit, and we're going out for one to them. But we are testing these arms in true microgravity later this year. So from this testing, as you see this compared to the previous slide of a free flyer, we're able to use those arms named Reach to deploy against an unprepared cube that we can actually swap out the different face surfaces of. So we can affix onto it of mylar, of aluminum, crumpled aluminum, Kapton, really give a wide variety data set. So not only are we inducing tumble, rotation, true microgravity, but also unprepared surfaces so that KMI has confidence as we go to that free flyer on the previous page that this works. And we're testing that inside the ISS. That is a whole hoot and caboodle to try and get testing inside the station with something this intriguing. But we've worked with a variety of partners and hardware and our contacts at Orbital Prime and Space Force to be able to move this together of civil, commercial, and national security all aligned for a shared purpose. So a question I get then, okay, Troy, you've talked about commercial beyond just the government. Where's that market? And it's multi-billion and approaching. So whether it's focusing on the orbital removal, which is often the first thought, orbital transfer, like a transfer vehicle or relocation of assets, and just the orbital data that we're working on right now. I believe our team got the word out this morning about our partnership with Privateer has advanced in our second year, where now customers can go to one of our services and select multiple items wherever they are. And these debris items, as they're shown on the screen, add to cart, just like you're running with Amazon. So it's something that we don't deliver next day yet, but it is something that gives the opportunity for customers to start to inform themselves on a variety of different perspectives they might have, as well as we can run that data on non-debris objects as well, but just bring a whole suite of options for this is where we're good. This is where we're excellent, is being able to relocate, retrieve, and rendezvous with unprepared assets in orbit. From the customer, I've been talking that we are dual use and we're seeing great buy-in from both sides. A whole series of great quotes here from great decision makers, both in uniform and those out. as well as I never hate to point out the great quote by the New Yorker rather early in our company's career, that we're driven. It's a team of individuals driven with this focus of how do we keep space clear for all, and that really helps fill in the gaps when sometimes it's a stressful day or the funding isn't always what you want to see as a startup. But we've been able to persevere, maintain, and continue to push on and really deliver to some of our early customers already. So my penultimate slide here is, okay, I've talked about what we're doing, talked about what we want to do. Where's really that bullet list? And so the development has succeeded with contracts. We actually built out our entire HQ in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, for anyone familiar with the great northern parts of our country, as well as we are, as I mentioned, building that ISS qualified reach, additional contracts with Air Force, Space Force, NASA, and then as a startup, always fundraising, and we've been very successfully gathering 60% of that upcoming round. So if anyone is investor or invested minded, that's a conversation that I spend a lot of my time focusing on, and I leave the engineers and the orbital dynamicists to actually do the fun part of this job. But looking forward, our future milestones are this testing in 2024, the demonstration likely to occur in 2026 as we've got launched at the tail end of 2025 for that free flyer, and then we're immediately beginning to scale. So it's something we recognize. Having one of these is great. Having a fleet of these is the way that America has kept the highways clear since Eisenhower built them. So it's something that as we go into these continued mass operations into 2030, this is a sequence of opportunities, bringing different capabilities to different orbits and meeting different challenges. So I'll pause here as I do take these rather quick, running through just as a high level, but I know that there's probably a series of questions from the group here. My contact information is here at the bottom. It was again at the front, and I'm available here as long as Eugene will give me. So I thank you. Again, keeping space clear for all is the focus, and KMI is working every aspect we can to do that. So thank you, and I'll open it for questions, I believe.
All right, so Adrian, do you have a microphone? You can ask your question.
I do.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, hi, I am from what you might consider one of your competitors, although not really. We've explored it and kind of backed out because we couldn't get anywhere. But might Kall Morris have any interest in further solutions? For instance, a way to turn orbital debris scrap into propellant on orbit.
Yes. Which group are you with?
CubeCap.
Okay. I'm personally unfamiliar, but I'd love to learn more. Yes, it's something I didn't include in this in this slide set. But as we go back to the overall payloads, the overall ConOps, step 10 there in the right hand is a flow chart that could take 3 more slides itself. I would rather see all these objects that are no longer necessary being repurposed in space for fuel, for structures, for giant mirrors if someone has a use for it. It's environmentally better than burning up in the atmosphere that I breathe every day. Second, there's huge economic and energy savings to not have to bring something that humanity fought God and physics to get it into orbit. It'd be a lot easier to not have to fight that on the way back. So I'd love to speak further with you to better understand that. But as Eugene was mentioning, we've talked with a few companies that are already working on some aspects of recycling solar panels, recycling aluminum. So the more partners we can have for that next stage ecosystem, there's 10 million kilograms of available material for this kind of collection repurposing. I'd rather have as few as possible come back to the atmosphere or the ocean than instead use it where it's at. Thank you.
You're quite welcome. And let me just say, this is exactly what I hoped I was going to hear when I saw the description. And this exact thing is why I am at this particular meeting. I will be in contact with you. Thank you kindly.
Thank you, Adrian.
All right, so Kall, what about the robotics that would be involved in disassembly or manipulating structures while they're in space still?
Yeah. So I don't have a slide that goes to that level of detail here, but I will jump to the kind of detail slide of how the actual retrieval process goes in a standstill.
Well, let me just interject for 1 second. So my question is, do you have partners, and are you interested in partners?
Yes, and yes.
Space? Okay.
So the reason I jumped to this is that I see us and my team sees KMI as more of the tow truck in a terrestrial model. So we're not necessarily the gas station attendant. We're not the mechanic. We're not the guy who swaps your battery from AAA. Our job and our expertise is retrieve, relocate, and rendezvous if necessary at the beginning. So it's something that we have partnerships for people who want to work with us of either we bring a resident space object to them that they can then service or refuel or do recycling. We've also had a few conversations of bringing something with us that, all right, we've affixed and secured this asset. Now they can reach over like a monkey's tail, a scorpion, whatever you want to feel best with, and be able to do some of that light servicing on site. That really depends on what the customer use case is. And for us, we're already seeing that our first manifested mission is going to be full manifest, is that we have A, B, C, and D of available objects to go and retrieve. So it's something that us relocating it will likely be easier in the immediate future. But if there's a jumper pack or a set of tools that should fly with us, that's something we definitely want to consider, as long as there's not considerations need to be made on the other side of it. Obviously would shorten our ability to go after multiple objects per mission. So again, welcome for more conversations on that if there's people here or people you know. But we already have some of those conversations beginning with true in-space servicers. I try to avoid that term for ourselves. We're in the logistics business. It just happens to start 100 kilometers up.
All right, so Jeremy has a question. I'll let him ask his before I continue asking mine. Go ahead, Jeremy.
So I was just curious, when satellites actually do have proper end of life, they either deorbit or they push to a high parking orbit. I actually have no idea how many satellites have made it into the high parking orbit and where that is, but I'm curious if you have plans for the capacity to reach that far out, grab from the high parking orbit and bring those back for reusable materials.
Yeah, so for the high parking orbit, are you talking more for GeoBirds or LEO satellites?
Again, this is coming from not enough knowledge, but it's end of life. Satellites have enough fuel either to deorbit themselves or push them to a higher orbit. I don't think that's as far out as the geosync, but it might actually be past that.
Yeah,
I don't know.
From my knowledge, and I'll also preface this if I didn't before, I do not have engineering training. My degree is actually in psychology, so I'm better with humans than I am with orbits. But from my level of understanding, the geo orbit is the well-maintained formal dining room of Earth's orbits. So when things are no longer necessary, it's often far, far easier to move them into that kind of holding graveyard orbit that's just beyond. That is a well-maintained area, and there's partners we work with that are focusing specifically that space logistics for one by name. And it's something that is an interesting area that we would definitely be happy to partner with, but it's kind of, grandma's linen in China. It's very well maintained. Our focus as a company is more to that closer to Earth LEO, which is the foyer. This is where the kids kick off the boots, the jackets, the mud, everything. And in that environment, I don't know of high success or high agreement among regulators for parking or graveyard orbits, because it is so congested and you'll be quickly fighting atmospheric reentry, which many of those would pass into a hazardous orbit or conjunction potential with the ISS. So for the most part, like Starlink's a great example, a LEO's constellation that if they have failures, they are designed and orbitally inserted that they would fall deeper into the atmosphere quickly before they move up to their long-term holding orbit. And then end of life is supposed to bring down and do that controlled reentry. So with that Troy's time of orbital physics lesson, our focus is for things that are about the 700 to 900 kilometer right now. There's a variety and a sweet spot of opportunity, specifically in sun synchronous orbit, which the United States has heavily participated in. But I will say that everything from near that ISS pizza box, as they call it, up through the high LEO environment is immediately within our wheelhouse. As we look towards GEO, MEO, I've had questions for cislunar and asteroids. That is something that, again, this is a tow truck model, I keep saying. So it's be more something we would need a ride to that area. You're not going to drive a tow truck from Germany down to Africa, but you can definitely take a Globemaster and hop the pond. So that's where we're at, is that the operational parameters here are to a more localized series of altitudes and inclinations, but it is something that we're already looking at future case of how can we help? If it's cislunar started getting debris about it, I'll be mad, but it's something we want to be able to respond and make sure that we leave a cleaner orbit than we found it. Good question, though.
All right, Bill Burner, you had a question?
Yeah, thanks. So, Troy, I accepted your LinkedIn invite, so look forward to continuing this conversation. So, as you know, we have a high ISP, relatively high thrust by space standards, in-space propulsion engine that we're working on for NASA. If you're the tow truck operator, are you making your own motors? And if you do need to get from LEO to MEO or from LEO to GEO in hours or days, would you be interested in that? Over.
Great question, and I'm glad that you already recognized a stranger's LinkedIn request. I was just so impressed from the last piece. So it's something that for our minimum viable product, that is something that we have a working relationship. We're actually under a I'll say government contract to develop some new innovations because we're focusing on electric propulsion for a lot of those near-term localized engagements. But to exactly your question of surge capacity, as I've talked to others in that domain, it's something that is of interest for us as we go into later models, whether it's like what Skunkworks did of okay, you make one plane and now you start making different versions for what they want to do. It's something that we're definitely looking at. So I'd love to get you in contact with our engineers to better understand the swap, the ISP, and see is this something that we want near term, medium term. But I'll definitely say it's of interest for us because, like you said, if there's a way to get farther and get there fast, there can be specific cases that call for that. So for those who are familiar with their Greek, you might know the Laelaps name is for our spacecraft is named after the mythological dog that always caught what it chased. And once you start with a dog analogy for a product, suddenly our customers take, oh, can we do a watchdog? Can we do a guard dog? Can we have Yes, and so having a fast insertion dog that can get way farther faster. I mean, the paratroopers, those ones look fun. So I'd definitely love to talk about that for more of these space-based models.
Perfect. We're Greyhound, fast and sleek. There you go.
I love it. I love it. All right.
I like that, Bill. All right. So the question in chat, Kernal, would you like to unmute and ask?
Yes. So is there an international body overseeing any of the permission or you're trying to prove out there? Meaning, could there be a mischief here? Derailing something that is not supposed to. And this is speaking from the defense perspective, right?
Yeah.
Or,
so from a defense perspective, I'm almost worried you were listening to a conversation I was having last week in Symposium. The phrase that was given to me is, Troy, we like what you're doing. It might be easier from our perspective to go after international assets that are a problem than to try and safely deorbit a unused old American asset. And that just made my eyes flash in shock because for those unfamiliar, there's the UN Outer Space Treaty, Liability Treaty, a whole set of treaties coming from the 60s, 70s between the United States and the, at the time, Soviet Union, with other powers around the world signing on, basically stating what you launch from your country is the responsibility of your country, and only your country should be the ones interacting with it. Now, that series of treaties was signed before my parents even met, so some things have changed. One of them being technology capability and alliances around the world. So it is something that offering as a services is one thing that we've discussed with a body of thought for space law. There are space lawyers. Sadly, I've yet to see a gavel in an astronaut suit, but I'll see the day. And so to the root of your question, there's not a central clearinghouse as of yet that would handle this. If a UK company wanted to hire a Swiss company to go move something for a Russian space station, nobody knows. So commercial contracts is one way to clearly state, define, and remove that possibility of nefarious action. But I think to the second half of your question, which was maybe a little less stated in the written portion, but more in the verbal, is it's uncertain. So right now, there's even a discussion that we're continuing to have with the executive branch and some of the leadership there of, if I want to salvage a Navy ship, a aircraft, a old tank, there's procedures with those different branches. But there's not quite a central house or form for if I wanted to recycle a US Air Force launched rocket in 1967. Those are unstated. So the clarity comes that if this was used in a protective mission, pushing our position forward or defending our assets, that was the part that I started my comments here of. That's a lot clearer aspect from the United States current body of thought, is there's a lot more clarity and ability for that option. But the policy side is extremely interesting. So I'll pause myself there because I've had a few hours of discussions, some at moderations, some with libations, but would love to talk further if you've got some concerns there, because some of that gets quickly more beyond what we'd be having in a public forum. But great question that you're scratching an unsolved spot. Over.
Thank you, Troy.
All right, so Adrian, I'm going to skip over your question and go to Colonel Myers because yours is going to take a little while. So the Colonel, do you want to give Troy a little insight?
Yeah, just real quick. Someone had contacted me, and I sat in a forum not too long ago, asking if I knew of a company that does what you guys are doing, and I did not. So there's a group. They have probably 150 different consultants. A lot of them in air and space. They have some of what you're talking about ability, but they were looking at other solutions. So if you could share your contact with me, I would just like to connect the two of you. I don't really have a dog in that fight, but I just happened to be on a call recently where we were being polled as to who might have solutions for this. And so hearing your presentation, I think you could potentially help what they're getting after, and they receive a good amount of funding. So there could be an opportunity for you. So if you'll just flip me an email or whatever, I put my email in earlier in the chat. I can just link you guys up together. Over.
I appreciate it, Colonel. I do have my email there at the bottom, troy@kallmorris.com. I must have joined after you shared that earlier, so if you can drop it again, I can definitely take that as an action. But yeah, that's very intriguing. I know that KMI has recently been granted some great access with Aerospace Corporation, and I will say with politeness and all reference, they went in a scientific colonoscopy of our technology, going through and through, and it was impressive to see our team being able to impress theirs, who've looked at dozens of pieces of technology. So it is something that it's refreshing to hear that there's conversations happening, and I greatly appreciate the opportunity to put our banner forward as a solution to it. So yeah, again, my email is there along the bottom. Otherwise, I'll follow up with Eugene if I didn't capture it otherwise. But no, sir, that's fantastic. Eugene, do we want to go to Adrian's question or follow up on that one?
Well, is that publishable? What you just discussed, the results of your colonoscopy?
Again, a polite and scientific one. That is one that I know is available through federal channels. We had one of our TPOCs and Colonel Rayleigh from AFRL. I believe he had already made reference to it, and I was like, how do colonels sleep? Because you guys seem to read and know everything. It's wonderful. So that is something that is available on the federal side, and I'd be happy to connect anyone to our Aerospace Corporation team that was the doctors in this situation, as I extend the analogy.
Okay, yeah, I was just checking to see if it was something that we could put at the beginning or at the end of the YouTube video. That was all.
Yeah, that report again goes very deep, and it's also a evaluation of every filing that we've ever made related to one of these technologies. So I'm just happy somebody read them, let alone that they had good engaging questions, and our team was able and willing to respond in kind. So again, if anyone's interested, I'm happy to get them connected if they're at their appropriate levels to read those reports, because this is great information, and our goal here is to share, inform, educate, and make sure that our capabilities are as available as we are able to present them on the technology side. And like there was the question from Kunal, sometimes the policy seems to be the longest pole in the tent. And I've learned from the unfortunate high number of trips I've made to DC and elsewhere that education is the first part of shortening that pole down. So happy to connect people as much as I'm able.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things we try to do here is provide a good education to everybody. All right, so let's go ahead and delve into Adrian's legal issue here.
Yeah, so if a U.S. company deorbited debris from a Russian satellite, could Russia sue? So that's very interesting. Currently, the way that those suits would happen, and Russia is the entity that has, to my knowledge, I believe, sued twice, once by Australia and once by Canada, and they only ended up paying about a small amount in one case, is that it is nation to nation. So as a U.S. company, I would be putting the U.S. Department of State in a sticky position if we just unabashedly went after a asset, because there's a list of the top 50 most dangerous objects by Darren McKnight, who's currently at Leo Labs. They do a great series of tracking, and in his top 50 list, I think 42 of the most dangerous objects are what's known as a Zenith Russian or Soviet Union launched rocket body. So if everyone played Kumbaya and the world was peaceful, that would be the target that us and hopefully every other debris focused individual on the planet would be focused on. But under the existing geopolitical situation that the world continues to shift in, yes, if we just decided to go after that without a body of defense and a body of good reasons, one, I would expect that any relationship that that company has with the U.S. government would be very soured. But second, Russia would be fully within their established rights to pursue legal action on the international level against the United States. Now, again, that case law is 2 pages deep. So it's something, there's a lot to be decided, and there's a lot of specificity not provided in that casework, but there is standings for it. So it's very interesting, and that's why working with your host nation, allied nations, that's already becoming dicey, but privateering or pirating other pieces in space, there's at least some legal standings to prevent that. Now, is that happening? That's a discussion for another time, but good question, Adrian.
All right, Bill, go ahead. Bill Burner.
And Bill, if you're talking,
sorry. I was busy typing. I was typing my question. So here, I'll transition to voice. So I was involved in a 6U mission out of ISS and Cygnus. That's just above ISS orbit, and we never acquired the vehicle, and it's now in. It hasn't decayed yet. It's still in orbit. It would be I have permission to retrieve that. Because we were looking at it as a target early on and had no capability to actually conduct the mission. But at least the NASA PI says sure, and we can work it through the system to get permission. If you need a target, I can give you the ephemeris.
That would be super interesting. Even first, I mean, my team can run in minutes or hours. The ability to rendezvous. You said that was deployed above ISS, so greater than 380.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's one of those Cygnus boost missions, where it was kind of cool. I mean, it was launched on Falcon 9. It was transshipped by hand by astronauts to Cygnus, and then they did a post Cygnus resupply mission. They did a boost to a slightly higher orbit and let these small sets go. So it was one of this flock that I think we got some tumble, so we never got enough solar flux to charge the batteries, and so it died. So all of that said, it would be a great story if you need a target. I think we can arrange it.
No, that would certainly be interesting to not play all of my cards down here. We've had a similar conversation with some of the test programs from inside the defense side, and they've had some similar options for that. And I will say that offering more options to my orbital rendezvous team would be better. Because it turns out that when you're getting pre-selected options that all had failures, kind of a little bit like you said, they're not always optimized to try and do, the lowest hanging fruit. So having more options to bring to my team there, as well as if it is something that is tied to the civilian side with NASA, that just opens more colors of money and more options there for moving things forward. So that'd be extremely interesting, as well as then I can start putting people in races for each other, because that's where I love seeing things move the fastest. When you have Congress, NASA, Navy, Air Force, Space Force is already our friend, so I don't have anything to blame for them. And then you can throw commercial in there. It now becomes a good old horse race where there's motivation to see things through and really demonstrate some of these capabilities, as you said, on a low risk of failure. It's already not working. And if we can bring it operational, or at least remove it as a uncoordinated object, that's a win for everybody. And I mean everybody.
Yeah, now the science team would love to see that, in the engineering team, to see that satellite again and figure out what went wrong. So
your hope would be to do a controlled re-entry, and have it survive to the ground?
No. I mean, whatever the possibility is to assess the condition. That would be, to first order, very, very helpful. To stabilize it, to see if we could get the solar panels to charge. There's not enough money to operate it, so I don't know about that. But anyway, there are a range of possibilities of simply being able to rendezvous with it and take a picture would be a huge victory for the science team.
Understood. I was questioning that last part there because we've had the conversations in the last 12 to 14 months with a number of providers that's longer term of re-entry vehicles, where we'd be able to grab something like this, safely control it, bring it to a pod, a payload bay, a number of different options depending on your size and your appetite for cost, and bring it back to the ground, much as was done in the STS missions, because it's something that's intriguing. If, okay, all we had was this one wire didn't disconnect, if we can safely grab it, bring it back, and try again, that can save, a student's thesis, $100 million program, a lot of things where I love it. So yeah, let's definitely have conversations on that.
Yeah, one more thing, just spitballing here. Since the thing was transshipped from Falcon to Station to Cygnus, it would be a layup if you could figure out a way to get the clearances from NASA to bring it back to the station. Because then a
Exactly what I
whole
was
bunch
just
of other
typing in.
other possibilities sort of present themselves over. I'm going to shut up and stop monopolizing the time.
Was that you, Jeremy, that was talking?
His thought completed as I was trying to type it in, that if it was a small enough object and you're talking about being a tow truck, just tow it back to the ISS. They bring crap back down all the time, sometimes to burn up, but sometimes to be returned. You've got a possible cargo hauler back to the surface right there.
Yeah. I will say, on the having just gone through the bloody ringer of getting our safety part clear, that is a fight I would be so ready to have, because there's a lot of very necessary, very needed safety concerns of anything approaching within the, again, as it's known, pizza box of Kara's prediction for conjunctions around the ISS. But if it's something that we can begin to walk through this, that accelerates the ISAM goals of the civil government, and offers some very unique opportunities for other things happening on the national security side. So if anyone's got a good friend at NASA who would be helping to sign off on this type of full return, I mean, I want to start calling this like not a Frisbee, boomerang mission, Operation Boomerang, of go, okay, let's go bring it back and they can try again, because that's very intriguing in a great number of ways, whether the Bishop airlock or other ways. That's intriguing in a heavy way.
So I'm going to lower my hand, but this is Bill again. I have friends in the administrator suite at NASA. I think we can get those clearances for you.
I love it.
Sounds great, Bill. Thank you.
And
So-
I see Adrian's additional thought there that I'll
Well, yeah,
verbalize,
but well, I want to. So, Art, I believe you've unmuted a couple times. Did you have any questions?
Not at this time. I really appreciate it. Following up on this, but I appreciate you asking. Thank you.
Okay, just wanted to make sure, because I noticed that you unmuted. So before we get onto Adrian again, did you say that you are not talking with Air Force, or excuse me, Space Force Futures?
No, my comment when I was mentioning the list of people we're having conversations with is Space Force has been a very early, very engaging partner.
Oh, okay.
So I don't want to put any mislove on them. They've been taking care of us and working with us in a number of ways. I'm excited to have these furthering conversations with some of the other branches, NASA, 3 letters, because one, we are a relatively small team. We do have to sleep sometimes. So it's great when we can get that opportunity to fight through the bureaucracy and land at the right desk or door of people most concerned or most aligned with this. But no, Space Force has certainly been a friend. So I would be remiss if I didn't appreciate them rather than anything else.
All right, then go ahead, Adrian. Or you want to address Adrian's question?
Yeah.
So I was just tossing in an extra comment on the discussion earlier where, oh, well, safety concerns if you return something to the ISS. Well, can you park it just outside the ISS? Or however far outside is no longer a safety concern. You don't have to get the licensing, but in the path of the reentry vehicle, just as a solution to that specific problem.
Yeah, it's where a variety of creative solutions comes in. I guess I'll go to this last slide here. The issue that you begin to have is this is me trying to toss a USPS letter into a passing semi truck with some of those reentry vehicles that once they are leaving or approaching ISS, the relative velocities can be quite interesting. Not saying it's a no, but it's something that might be a viable thing of like, okay, Amazon truck is going to stop short of the city limits. We put on the package and then it goes inside the ISS safety zone. There's a definite thought process to it. It's a question of value. Is it easier for us to safety clear our vessel to be able to re-enter into a grabbable position for the Canada arm, and they can bring the whole darn thing inside? This spacecraft of ours is designed as an ESPA class, so sub 200 kilograms. I mean, if we're doing something as amazing as the, for now, named Boomerang, I don't even care if you break a solar panel off. Don't create debris, but there's acceptable losses we'll take on our side if it increases the scientific value of the overall mission and the validity of, this would be a amazing advancement that would, again, echo back to the 80s. Story time for just a moment is, space is such an important thing here on the ground, and there's so many pieces of the world that ignore it. One that doesn't is Lloyd's of London, which is what the New York Stock Exchange is to futures and commodities. Lloyd's of London in London is the 400+ year old home of insurance. And in their history booklet of where they discuss of Queens and this and that, they discuss space on one page, and it's the retrieval of the satellites that they helped coordinate from the space shuttle. So it is something that of everything cool space has ever done for speed, imaging, communication, peace on Earth, and therefore after, it's the action of moving logistically that is in their book of next to kings and queens. So this would be awesome because I'd love to amend it to some of my friends over there and be like, hey, we're doing it again, but this time it's going to be even freaking cooler. So I love it. I love the ideas happening here. Thank you.
Did you mentioned 3-letter agencies. Are you working with 3-letter agencies or no?
That is a very beginning relationship. One of our first TPOCs when we began our engagement with the Space Force, he has been reassigned into, I think I can say it, well, NRO is at least non-classified, so I can say that where he's at. So that's a conversation that's continuing, but it's also something that with a third of our company carries their prior clearances, as well as one of our advisors is current on his TSSCI. So if there's conversations that are even above my level, our company is prepared to take those because there's a variety of unique solutions once you start offering the ability to non-destructively secure and release objects. It's something that we've had conversations of, do you need to return an old bird and make sure the technology doesn't burn up or fall onto another part of the planet? Is it something you want to bring it back just to check what you built 30 years ago or shorter? So it is something that, again, KMI is very open to those positive engagements with the different aspects of both the government as well as key commercial partners.
Okay, yeah, because I was thinking more on the line of the intelligence agencies, and with your permission, I'd like to put this in front of InQtel, which is basically the way into those agencies. They vet everything.
Yeah, no, that would be great. I was just having a conversation with one of our former InQtel associates last night. So it's something that we're starting on their radar, but I never hesitate to have positive pings from multiple places.
Got it. I agree with that. All right. So any other questions for Troy? And Colonel Myers and Bill Bruner are still on the call. So anybody have questions for them? Go ahead, Adrian.
You said your satellite is ESPO class. Is it specifically 100 kilogram?
Again, not as an engineer. I believe we are 15-inch ESPA class, so it's sub 200 kilograms. Nominally, that's depending on some of the payload finalizations, 120 to 140 kilograms. But that's the envelope that we're planning initial operations.
Okay. It's just another thing I would like to discuss with you offline, because there's a possibility if you can get it down to 100.
Okay. That is something that, certainly intriguing. And we've had discussions of where someone said, what if you just shot out a Pez dispenser of these to go get stuff? And I'm like, you have a wild imagination. If you've got a funding line, I would love to throw it to the engineers. So it's something that we've looked at that little bit larger size, mostly for fuel capacity, to really be able to give us that reach of going distance, capturing multiple objects, and being able to fully remediate them. But if there's a benefit to being under that 100 kilograms, I'm always happy to fight the scale. I try myself. It'd be nice to slim some weight on this spacecraft too, if there's a good reason. So I'd love to take that offline.
Well, limited stuff I can say publicly, but let's just say, Mary, this specific thing was the thing I said earlier of the be able to generate fuel on orbit, so you don't need to carry that much fuel.
Yeah, we've had a thought plan. It was titled as Delta V Vulture, being able to grab onto something like a rocket body that's 83% aluminum, use that and turn it into a solid fuel. Because I know there's some molybdenum testing happening from an Australian firm. There's a lot of great cool things happening out there. But as we get to a future case, I mean, that starts to move to the best parts of science fiction. So I love it, and it's something very interesting for sure.
Hey, we just put an aluminum reactor on it, and you just go harvest all the fuel you want.
Yeah. Again, my concern as a debris guy is I want to make sure we're not spitting more out behind us, because I've seen some testing where it's like, oh yeah, it's just sending out this shrapnel behind you. I'm like, this is a problem for next year. Don't do this to me. So we got to be careful, but I like solutions.
Yeah, let's sign an NDA so I can show you the specific schematics for a solution to exactly that problem, please.
Yeah, love to have that conversation.
All right. Anything else? Anything for Bill, Troy, the Colonel?
Nope. Eugene, I'll follow up with you afterwards to make sure I close that connection you mentioned at the beginning, as well as to make sure I've got Colonel Myers' information. Bill and I are already connected. We're taking this in spades. So I love this forum. It's greatly appreciated. And thank you everyone for your time, interest, and attention. These are shareable slides. So Eugene, I'll make sure I'll get these to you as well. I just always like to make sure in case there's modifications needed from during the presentation, I'm able to make those. But no, this was great.
Yeah, a lot of the federal people that I work with like to have them printed and in front of them. So, which is another reason why I have a separate repository for the videos, because not a lot of federal people can watch these at work. So, by putting them in a spot where they can download them and watch them later works much better.
Yeah, understood. So I'll go camera off. Again, if anyone needs me, reach out from email, LinkedIn. Happy to try and connect as much as I've got time. And thanks everyone again for your time.
All right. Well, thank you. Hey, I want to thank everybody. It's a great session today. I really appreciate all the comments and all the input, questions. I think we got a lot of good stuff accomplished today, a whole lot of good stuff. And looking forward to all the follow-up. So for Troy, the Colonel, and Bill, if you can keep me CC'd on all of this, even the NDAs, so that I can be involved. I like to track the progress so that I can share it with the community that, what we're doing. Thus far, we've set up over 50, or we've identified over 50 relationships from 17 presentations. And I think today we probably just set up another dozen or two. So it's really good. Shows the value, and that's why I retired from the federal government to build this, because I saw this value and I saw what this could be if we commercialized it. So thank you everyone for your presentations. Thank you everyone for your questions. It'll probably be Monday before the videos are up on YouTube. And if nobody has anything for me, I'll give you a few seconds. All right, I'm not hearing anything, so thank you again. And
Thanks,
we'll
Eugene.
see everybody next week. Yeah, Bill.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
So long. Bye.